Hello, my name is Aaron Goldman. Today I'm going to be discussing some research that I've been helping conduct as a research assistant in the Memory and Cognition Lab under the supervision of Dr. Chris Walheim and his graduate assistant, Paige Kemp. As you saw from the title, this study pertains to fake news, which is any piece of misleading or untrue information that is presented as true regarding current events. Fake news can have some serious impairments on both memory and belief in true information, and that could have some serious consequences, especially in the age of a pandemic. Previous research has shown that reminding one of fake news before presenting them with a correction can increase both memory and beliefs in said corrections. The theory behind this is that presenting misinformation reminders allows for an integrated encoding of both true and false information, improving memory for both. However, there is some uncertainty regarding whether or not that misinformation component was really necessary. Could it instead be that showing somebody a labeled correction increases saliency of said correction, and that's what elicits these effects? That's what the current study seeks to resolve. This study is composed of two separate experiments, the first one comparing the effects of fake news reminders to correction labels, and the second one comparing the effects of fake news reminders to misinformation labels. And this is actually more of a motivated forgetting strategy. We went into the experiment with the following hypotheses, the first being that fake news reminders presented before corrections will improve memory and belief accuracy more than simply labeling the corrections or misinformation headlines on their own. The second is the theoretical proposal hinted at earlier, that fake news reminders allow for integrated encoding of true and false information, and this allows for better memory for both, thus allowing for better differentiation between the two of them. Both experiments followed the same general method. Phases 1 and 2 were used for encoding, and phase 3 was the test phase. In phase 1, participants were shown a variety of true and false news headlines, and in phase 2, all the false headlines were corrected. The way in which these headlines were corrected is what separates each condition. Now, of course, the real news headlines were simply repeated as they were correct the first time around. Some of the fake news headlines were corrected with no indication that the correction occurred, so it's up to the participant to realize that. Some of the fake news headlines were corrected after a brief reminder of the misinformation shown in phase 1. In experiment 1 only, some of the corrections were shown with a correction label, and of course that is to help compare correction labels to misinformation reminders. And finally, in experiment 2 only, some of the misinformation headlines were flagged as misinformation, and participants were asked to forget any and all of those headlines. And then, of course, the real news counterpart was shown in phase 2. This is what an experiment session would look like altogether. All conditions are randomly distributed throughout, and of course, these conditions also occur within subjects. Phase 3 is the test phase. Participants are asked to recall information from phase 2, their accuracy, and that is where we get the data for memory accuracy. Participants then rate their belief of the headline itself, and the accuracy in those ratings is where we get the belief accuracy. Then participants are asked if this headline corrected fake news from phase 1. If they respond no, they move on to the next prompt. And if they respond yes, then they're asked to recall that fake news headline from phase 1. Looking at the results for experiment 1, we can see that earlier findings were replicated in the sense that correction plus reminder condition had the best enhanced memory accuracy relative to both labeled corrections and unlabeled corrections. Critically though, correction labels did have an intermediate improvement on memory accuracy relative to unlabeled corrections, but the misinformation reminder component is really what enhanced memory the most. Taking a look at belief accuracy, we can see that the correction plus reminder condition had a significant improvement over the correction condition. However, the labeled correction condition was not significantly different from either of them. Taking a look at this, it's a conditional analysis. Basically, we're just zooming in on these points over here. These points are the mean memory accuracy. And we take a look at these green points over here. So the size of these green points represents the amount of times that a participant correctly responded yes when asked if the fake news from phase 1 was corrected in phase 2. And the height of these green points represents the accuracy of that fake news recall. And we could see that in the correction plus reminder condition, accuracy was highest, and the number of correct recall responses were also highest, as well as the corrections. Taking a look at the results from experiment 2, we can see again that the correction plus reminder condition yielded the best results in terms of enhancing memory accuracy, and that the misinformation flagged condition and the correction condition were relatively comparable. Now, of course, these data are preliminary. They're still being collected, so this is definitely subject to change, but at the moment, there's no significant difference between flagged misinformation and unlabeled corrections. Taking a look at belief accuracy, there is no difference across any of the conditions. And once again, the conditional analyses mirror the same results from experiment 1. We can see that the reminder plus correction condition had the most number of correct answers of yes, this headline was corrected in phase 2, and of course, the greatest accuracy of fake news recall. So what can we conclude from these data? Well, number one, the idea that fake news reminders increase memory and belief in corrections, which is in support of our first hypothesis. Second, we can conclude that correction labels did have a similar benefit in the sense of improving memory and belief, but critically to a lesser extent than the fake news reminder condition. That misinformation component wasn't necessary. Next, we can conclude that misinformation flags did not have a relative improvement on memory or belief accuracy compared to unlabeled corrections, which is interesting because that's how a lot of social media companies will correct fake news. Finally, the conditional analyses support the second hypothesis, this idea that fake news reminders help allow for improved memory for both true and false information, and the reminding of both can help the remembrance of the other. Finally, these results can help inform fact checkers and social media companies alike on the most effective ways in which to limit the effects of fake news. So instead of using these misinformation flags, they can use methods similar to what was used in this experiment, correcting misinformation, but after presenting them with a reminder. Here are the citations that we used for both the poster and this presentation. And over here in the bottom right corner is any information or contact information in case there are any questions. Thank you.